Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is Philippe Talavera. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It is great to have you here, Philippe, all the way from Namibia. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. It's evening time for us, but so yeah, it's the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, but it's a bit early
Definitely.
day, but it's fine. And
I
you?
love I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's early afternoon here, and it is great to be able to talk with you and get to know about you and get to know about all the important and amazing work that you do. So to kick this off, we always like to start with having our guests introduce themselves to our audience and letting them know a little bit about your experience and your background. So let's start with that.
Sure. I've got a strange background. I was born in France. I guess you can hear with my accent. Uh,
Hmm.
and I did my studies, or most of my studies, in France. Then I moved to South Africa for my PhD. And then from South Africa, I moved to Namibia back in 97. I won't tell you how old I am, but yes, that was some time ago. So I've been living in Namibia since 97. So that's what, 24 years now.
Hmm.
I've got complex educational background. I was not quite sure what to do, I guess, like many people. So I've got a
Hmm.
PhD in veterinary science. I did human biochemistry and I did theater as a minor.
Hmm.
And then I decided to try to combine all those things and work with the art, but adding
Hmm.
a scientific background as well to what I do. And I created an organization in Namibia, Ombetja Yehinga, which everybody calls Oyo.
Hmm.
And the idea of Oyo is to use art to talk about social issues. So I could reconcile both sides, my artistic side and my more
Hmm.
scientific
Hmm.
side.
I love that. I love that. And talk to us a little bit about the about Oya and the work that you do with Umbetcha Yehinga Organization Trust and what the goals you're trying to accomplish when it comes to this.
Sure. So the idea of Oyo is to use art to talk about social issues. So all
Hmm.
our projects have an art component. It can be film, it can be dance. We do a lot of work with
Hmm.
dance. It can be a photographic exhibition. We have a
Hmm.
photographic exhibition coming up soon. So we use different art form to talk about social issues that are important at the time. So back in the day, we did a lot of work on HIV. More
Hmm.
recently, we do a lot of work on teenage pregnancy, gender-based violence, and also a lot of work on human rights. And the basic idea is that the art, unlike workshops, training, conferences, don't appeal to your intellect, they appeal to your heart. And the idea is to
Hmm.
make people feel. So if you feel about a certain issue, you are more likely, I think, to react and to respond than if you think. A lot of people are not intellectual, and it's not the same approach. So the idea is to make you feel for the character on stage, or
Hmm.
feel for the character in the film, and create a debate, create change. Hopefully, I believe change starts with a discussion. So we just
Yes.
need to find the tools to create a discussion. And that's what we try to do, whether it is the dance troupe or the film or the photographic exhibition, is to create a discussion and to get people
Yes.
to start talking and debating, but debating in a way that is safe. And that's what the art
Mm.
provide. They provide a safe space.
And so what's that conversation like, being able to produce this art and to do things in this way in a place like Namibia? How is the conversation different there and the perspective and how you come at creating the films or come at creating the art? How is it different than it would be, say, in Europe where you're from, or maybe even America? How different is it, and what are the pros and the cons to that?
Look, I think the basic idea would still be the same, because when we talk about a certain issue, we work
Hmm.
with people affected by that issue.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
for example, if we talk about child marriage, we will work with girls who are being married or will be married at an early age, and we start from their stories. So create spaces where they can tell stories, and we start from their stories. So the stories will be different because the stories in the States or the stories in Europe or the stories in Namibia are not the same. But the basic idea is the same, is to listen to the stories, to listen to what people go through, people who are directly affected by the issue, and build a story from there. We never take only one story. We'll always take a little bit of that story and a little bit of that story, and then we combine it into something.
I love that. I love that. And that is so important, to be able to not only create the stories, but to have those stories out there so people are able to learn, to consume, to open their minds, to change their perspectives, you know, as you said, to facilitate change in a certain way. And that's the power of art. You know, the art has always been like that, being able to be used to create change. And so as an artist yourself, a man of science, but also an artist, you are a filmmaker. And I'd just love to talk about a couple of the films that you have made, and everything about it, and what went into making it, and the story. So let's first talk about Kapana, a Namibian love story. Tell me about that.
Okay, Kapana was probably one of the most difficult films we worked on, but in Namibia, and I guess that would be one issue that is different from the state, LGBTQI plus relationships are still illegal. In many ways. We still have old legislation that criminalize same-sex relationships, particularly same-sex relationships between two men. It's quite different from women, but same-sex relationship between two men are...
Same in Jamaica. I'm originally from Jamaica, and it's the same way there.
Exactly. So, so there's been, for the last 3-4 years, some talks about the need to decriminalize same-sex relationship. And Kapana is, in a way, our contribution to the discussion. Why should the state legislate private relationship? It makes no sense. It's a private relationship. As long as it is between consenting adults, it's a private relationship. So why should the state be involved in a private relationship? When we started working on Kapana, we looked at what exists in Africa in terms of LGBT story. And very often, there's been some beautiful movies, but very often they are very dramatic. It's the gay guy being kicked out of the house, being arrested by the police, being sent to jail. And we thought we don't want that story to be the only narrative. And when we work with the writers, we keep on saying or thinking, what if a young teenager somewhere in a village struggling with his sexuality is looking at a film? Does he want to see drama all the time and think that his life will be misery? Or does he want to think that actually I can also fall in love and I can also love and be loved? And that's where Kapana comes from. We decided to make it a love story. So it's a non-conventional love story because it's a love story between two men in a country where this love is forbidden. But we decided to make it a love story. So it follows a very classic love story. Two people meet, fall in love, something happens, they get separated, and then they will try to get back together. So it's a very classic model of a love story. But the idea was to offer a little bit of hope, especially people who might be struggling with their sexuality, and not just wanting to think their life will be a misery, their parents will kick them out of the house, the police will arrest them. While it is a reality, it's not the only reality. So that's what we were trying to achieve with Kapana, and to create that discussion.
So tell me something. What does Kapana mean, the word?
Okay, in Namibia, we have a market where people sell, it's like barbecued meat. And barbecued meat is called Kapana.
Okay.
It's very Namibian. It's a very common place where everybody goes from all walk of life. You go to the market and you buy your Kapana. So you meet everybody from society really at the Kapana market. It's a very common place in Namibia, and so many scenes actually happen at the Kapana market that we thought we should in Kapana, actually, because it makes sense. It's where those guys meet, and it's where a lot of the things happen. So that's where the name comes from, but it's also because it's very typical Namibian. So everybody in Namibia will know what we mean when we talk about Kapana.
Certainly. And what's the response been like when it comes to Kapana? What's the response been like? And, have you heard from, LGBT people, LGBT organizations, all of that to see how they feel about it and the story? What's that response been like for you since the release of the film?
Okay, we have an international response, and we've been very happy with it because we won quite a few prizes, which is quite amazing. But locally, we had audiences in the capital city that are probably a little bit more open-minded. And we had really very interesting discussion during the screenings. And the local LGBTQI plus community has really embraced Kapana. And they really consider it is their story and it is their film, which I'm very proud of. I'm also very happy about it. And we also presented it in a few places that are more conservative, more traditional. And that was quite interesting because then we had a discussion. We had some people. It's funny because it's always come down to people for and against, as if you could be for and against the sexual orientation. But let's say people for keeping it a crime and people against keeping it a crime. And then it creates a discussion between the group. And that's what we want, because the change cannot come from outside. It cannot be me, still as a white person, or a foreigner, or someone from the state or someone from Europe coming to say you should change. The change has to come from inside.
Yes,
it's only by having those discussions and by creating those debates that we can do it. But it's quite amazing because in the beginning, in a couple of more conservative places, in the beginning, when they see the two guys and they see the two guys kissing, they are laughing and making fun of those guys and calling them a bit some names or whatever. And then as the film goes, they start to get attached to those two characters.
There you go. The power of art.
They forget there are two guys, and at the end, because at one stage they get separated. So at the end, when one of the guys, Simeon, goes back to George, some people say, yes, he's coming back to you. And they completely forgot it's
that,
two men.
yes.
That's what we want people to realize, that it's two people.
Yes.
And we should just respect their lives, their wishes, what they want to do, and just consider them as people. We don't have to label them, and labels are often very dangerous, whether you label people are straight, gay, whatever. Let's stop labeling people. Let's just look at people as people.
Yes. And that's so important. That is really, really important. I'd also like for you to talk a little bit about Kukuri, because that's another film that you've done, and of course with the with Ombetja Yehinga organization, of course, being involved as well. So talk to me about Kukuri and what it's about.
Kukuri is a complete opposite to Kapana, and it's because it's looking at one of the other completely extreme social issues we can have in some part of the country that are more traditional. We still have child marriage. So it's acceptable that families will marry the girl child, will decide for the child who the husband will be. The husband is paying what is called a lobola, which is a traditional gift to the family in some ways. And the girls can be as young as 14, 15, and then she's getting married. So we wanted to address that issue, that it's not right in the 21st century that girls still get married even if they don't really want to.
Yeah.
And that it also doesn't make sense in terms of the wider legislation in the country, which is looking at being more gender equal and more respectful of the rights of girls and women. So we worked for Kukuri in a community where child marriage happened. And what
Wow.
is interesting with Kukuri is that all the actors are community people. There's no professional actors in Kukuri. They are all real people from a real community where it's really happening. And it talks about the story of this girl who is going to school and she dreams of becoming a lawyer, but the family has other plans and she ended up being married and she ended up having to drop out of school.
So tell me, what with doing the film, did anyone from the community, anyone that was involved with it, any of the actors that were in it, did being in the film and being a part of that story change anyone's perspective? Did it give them more insight on what's going on in their own community? Did it spark a conversation within that community, you know, about those practices and how they feel about it and how they feel about that heritage, that culture, if they want to move forward? Like, what was that conversation like afterwards when it comes to those community members?
It was interesting. I mean, that specific community, the traditional chief was quite open-minded and is quite against the practice of child marriage. So that was already an advantage because the chief was willing to talk about it and willing to address it with the community. What was really interesting is that the older generation, and in the Kukuri, the generation that plays the role of the grandmothers, if you ask them, what do you think about child marriage? Especially if I ask them, because they see I'm a white person, they will give the polite answer that it's not good. But you can see in the way they say it that they are not convinced, because it has been done. It has been done like that for hundreds of years. So why should it change? So the older generation, I think it would be very difficult for them to change and very difficult for them to accept that what has been done for hundreds of years doesn't need to continue for the next 100 of years. The middle generation, the one that is 30, 40, it was more interesting, and they are more in between. They are not always completely modern yet, but they are not as traditional as the older people. And that's the generation with which the discussion is interesting. It's quite gender imbalance. Some men are still quite in favor of child marriage because, of course, they are the one that will benefit.
Exactly. They're the one.
They are the one that will get married to a nice young girl. So why shouldn't they? So sometimes, it's not a discussion that is always easy. It's not something that will change overnight either. But again, it's something that we need to start talking about, and we need to
definitely
continue talking again and again until there is a change. And for the younger generation, that they know who they can talk to if they find themselves in the situation, and if they get in this conflict between generations, where can they call or where can they go to say, look, where my family want me to get married, I don't want to get married, what can I do? So for them to know that there is an alternative, that they just don't have to say yes.
Certainly. Well, how can people see these films if they want to? Kukuri, Kapana, how are they able to see them?
Well, for now, they are not really widely distributed. They have taught some festivals. So during festivals, it was sort of easier to watch them, especially since COVID and more festivals being online. There was a possibility to see them. For example, Kapana will be at Image Out, which is in New York State, from the end of April. So people in the States, at least in New York State, will be able to watch Kapana for, I think it's a week or 10 days for the duration of the festivals.
Oh, awesome.
So during those festivals, there's been opportunity to watch the film online. We are busy discussing possibly with some pop-up channels. So it will be, for example, in Africa. Kukuri will be in Africa for a month in May and June, around African Day. So there's those opportunities that are more like ad hoc type of opportunity.
Certainly.
So it's more like 10 days here, 1 month there. It's not all the territories at all time. Unfortunately, we don't have Netflix or anybody watch it. So that would have been nice.
That would be great.
But for now, it's more like those pop-up channels.
Yes. Well, as a creative, what kind of stories are you drawn to that you like to tell, and what can people look out next for? Like, could you give us a hint as to what next you might be working on that people could see in the near future?
Look, I'm always drawn to stories where people are put in a situation where they should not be, especially in the 21st century, like the girls forced to marry, like people of same sex not being able to live freely. And I don't know if it will work, but since COVID, we unfortunately see many more street children, many children living in the streets, especially in the capital city. And that's a direct effect of COVID and the financial situations we are in. And I would really love to work with those children, whether or something else. Also tell their stories. How as a child do you end up in the street, and how can you think that life in the street, basically begging, can be better than anything else. So I would be really interested in working with those children and find out more first about them and their lives. And try to see what solutions we could find together with them.
Yes. Well, that sounds very interesting. Sounds like some good work you've got cooking up over there. Tell our viewers how they can find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing, find out more about Ombetja Yehinga organization, how they can donate, how they can follow, what website they should go to. So give it all to us.
Sure. We have a website. It's called www.ombetja.org. We are not very active on our website, I have to admit, but we have a Facebook page. So if you look for Ombetja, Ombetja on Facebook, then you will find us. And on Facebook, we are quite active. So whenever we have a performance, a project, an activity in schools, in the community, we put it on Facebook. So our Facebook page is probably the best way to connect because that's where we are the most active. And also you can DM directly to the organization, and we don't always reply immediately, but there will be someone who will reply sooner or later. So that's a possibility. And if some people want to donate, which we would really be appreciative of course, we have a global giving page. So globalgiving.org is an organization where you can donate to a lot of organizations actually all over the world. And again, if you look for Ombetja, you will find a page where you can donate.
Awesome. Well, we're going to have those links in the description below so that our audience can go ahead and click on it. You can find out more, you can donate, you can do all of that. And I'm sure you can also be able to keep updated when the next film screening is coming to the next film festival, where you will get a chance to see the wonderful films like Kapana. So Philippe, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure getting to talk with you, getting to to chat with you, getting to really sit down, pick your brain a little bit, and find out more about Oya and all the work that you do. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you do in our communities and the stories that you tell. It's so important.
Well, thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And it's a perfect way of ending the day. So thank you.
Certainly. It's my pleasure. Have a wonderful day. Please follow Team Racine Productions at Team Racine on all forms of social media. Click around our YouTube channel, check out our other interviews, blogs, panels, and all of that. And of course, like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.